men. But back to the trust itself, you mentioned this one that I consider to be somewhat scary. Would be the irrevocable trust. Why does it sound scary to me?
Yeah, that's the one that has people profusely sweating at the thought of an irrevocable trust. But in my line of work, the irrevocable trust is primarily used for asset protection purposes. So you're effectively saying that you don't own that asset. And that's a beautiful tool to use if you're considering avoiding creditors or protecting assets against creditors. So that's where the irrevocable trust is a useful tool.
So that's more what wealthy politicians do, huh?
Not necessarily. I mean, you could have maybe, I don't know, say a couple 100,000 that you want to protect for your children. And if you have concerns about getting ill and going into a nursing home, then as you know, then you're paying 16,000 a month. Now, you could find a way to protect the 200,000 through using an irrevocable trust. So it's not just for wealthy people.
Okay, so that brings us to more. We'll take a turn toward the medical aspect. If someone does become ill, or is ill, or may become ill in the future, and they put together an irrevocable trust, how long do you have to have that trust, or do you have to dispense of your assets before, like the state of New York says, enough time hasn't passed?
That and as things currently stand, it's 60 months, so 5 years. So if you set this irrevocable trust up, you need to be sure that you're not going to require skilled nursing support or Medicaid support, for example, within 60 months of that transfer into the trust.
I remember it used to be 3 years. You know that?
Yeah, I'm hearing it's going up to 7 years.
Get out.
I'm hearing it.
It's really sad. This is a good conversation for people who think they're not going to become ill, who think that I'm 50 and I don't need to do anything because I got 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years now. And then something happens and they lose everything they have because the government, I'm sort of anti-government in the sense of this kind of stuff. People work their whole life to build an estate, and then they become ill, and they pay taxes, and they pay all their Medicaid, Medicare taxes, and they don't even get their Social Security because they're not old enough, but they become ill, or they get hit in an automobile accident or something like that. And now, after you say in Medicare takes care of the person for 90 days or 120 days in a nursing home, then you got to go on Medicaid, which people get confused between the two. So Medicare is a federal program, Medicaid's a state program, and everybody thinks Medicaid's only for the poor, which and people think about that, but if you have assets, you'd like the government to take care of you and maintain your assets. That doesn't happen under these scenarios because then they start chipping away at your house, first of all, or your bank accounts. Is that true?
Yeah. Every case is different, but it depends on the asset in question. There are certain assets which are actually protected federally, such as traditional IRAs or 401ks or retirement funds. But you have to be careful there because there are other assets within the retirement sphere, let's just say, which are not protected, such as the Roth IRA and things like that. So you have to look at each asset individually.
Well, this is really outstanding discussion because we're talking, this is a health program, Health Monday program, and this works right into it. People think that health is all about, do I have a skin disease? We're talking about dermatitis next, we have a dermatologist in, but it's also about dying. Most people, like I had somebody come on recently and she's talking about dying, and she said, we always talk about passing on. It really means the person died. And I think, we're afraid to say that. They say, I'm sorry that your family member passed. Passed by where?
Yeah.
But anyhow,
my favorite is the word expired. I've heard that one bandied about a few times.
Expired, okay, time's up. Next account, please. So I think it's important. There's so many aspects of this. But back to the irrevocable. If somebody put together an irrevocable trust, and to say they were 45 years old, and then all of a sudden they go like, they give it to their family or their wife. They go like, I need to do something, and then they can't do it.
Well, that's actually a big concern that a lot of people have with these irrevocable trusts, which is why you really do need to have a skilled elder law attorney draft these types of trusts. Because
That would be you?
That would be me. Because ultimately what you're looking for, we've seen these scenarios being played out, and we do what we need to do, and we include certain provisions, magic provisions, in these types of trusts, which enable the irrevocable trust to be revocable. So it kind of magically disappears, but that does require certain conditions being met, such as beneficiaries under the trust agreeing, and if every beneficiary agrees, then you can revoke.
But you have to have all the beneficiaries agreeing, right?
You do, except there is a mechanism in place also. If one beneficiary does not agree, then there is a way around that as well. So
You can get rid of that person,
you can get rid of that person.
but not by their demise.
Not by their demise, no. But it's a really neat tool called a limited power of appointment, but that's for another day, I think.
Well, that's it. But it's interesting to know that. It would make somebody less hesitant to do it if they knew that there was a limited, what was it again?
It's called limited power of appointment. It's one where you can, I call it limited power of disappointment, because it's removing a beneficiary from any entitlement, but that's a mechanism where you can remove someone.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you give people a certain authority within a trust, or irrevocable trust, or even in business, and then you find out they're the wrong person, and they're not working to your best, to your benefit. So that's pretty interesting. How about when you go into a hospital, they make you sign this piece of paper that says what?
Yeah, it's typically called a healthcare proxy,
Right.
where you're appointing someone to make healthcare decisions on your behalf.
How does that work?
Well, I mean, that's kind of, it is what it is. It says you're basically saying, I want to appoint you to be the person to make healthcare decisions on my behalf, should, and this is an important point, should I be incapable of making those decisions myself. So up until the time you become mentally incapable, the law bends over backwards to have you, the sick person, make those decisions. But when you're not capable of, that's where your agent under a healthcare proxy can then make those decisions.
I mean, everybody, it's interesting when you go into the hospital, everybody says you have a healthcare proxy, and you say yes. They never check, of course. You just say yes.
Right, and what's also scary is you could have a wonderfully drawn up healthcare proxy.
And no one can find it.
One, no one can find it, but two, when you walk into a hospital, they thrust a standard healthcare proxy in front of you for you to sign, which revokes what you previously had done, which is quite something.
That's pretty. Let's say that again. That's pretty interesting. Dan
that's difficult.
Perked up.
That is a very, very fascinating concept that literally it overrides what you already had written.
Yeah, and it's scary, and a lot of people do wonder about what to do with documents, and there isn't really a central registry bureau where you can file your estate planning documents. Unlike with England, where there is a central registry bureau, so you can go to an office to locate a document. But here in New York, there is no such thing. So when people ask me, well, what should I do then? Where should I put my healthcare proxy? I typically tell them, look, this might sound odd, but have it stuck to your fridge door.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, it seems to be the thing that paramedics
or on your pillow.
Actually, I've heard that many times before, where because if a paramedic has to come to the house and stuff like that, you can just point to it and it's there.
I think, absolutely. I think they're also trained to look towards the fridge as well.
Is that right?
So, yeah.
Trained to look toward the fridge.
Yeah.
Not for food, but for the healthcare proxy. That's good. Raid the refrigerator. No, take the healthcare proxy. Well, that's interesting. Back to the registry. I'm a big proponent of certifying people to do certain things, even though the government says that certification doesn't exist. Why don't you set up a registry?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I know.
It's your own registry. You let people there, and you can notify people. It's sad that people can't file documents someplace. You can't give it to a bank to put into your safe deposit box. You can't find that for months afterwards.
Exactly.
And that brings me to another point. Safe deposit boxes, how good are they?
Terrible. Don't do it. Don't do it. Especially ones at banks. I can't tell you how much of a headache that gives me when... I'll give you a scenario. Last week, I have a client who I'm trying to assist father died in New York, and all assets in New York except there's one safe deposit box in a bank in Florida. So now we have to figure out, one, how do we go about getting an order from the judge to allow us to open that safe deposit box? 2, having someone go down to Florida to open and look and see what's in that safe deposit box. And 3, whether there's jurisdiction to actually open, because we're talking about New York and Florida. So my advice is, with safe deposit boxes and banks, I would just typically avoid that like the plague.
Better to have your own home safe.
Yes, I would
You can
agree.
pick it up and walk out with it.
Yeah.
Plus, the banks are terrible themselves. I want to come back to safe deposit, but I have a question about that regarding individual and corporate boxes for people. Go ahead, Dan. You want to say something?
Oh, we're just ready for a break right now,
Let's do it.
and Anthony, you're able to stay.
I can stay for a few minutes, yeah.
Okay,
absolutely, yeah.
excellent. And yes, let's take it off to a break right now. And you are here with us at KCR, Kingston Community Radio, AM 920 and 92.5 FM, and streaming online at mykcr.org. And thank you for being with us right now, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Millions of conversations will happen today, but few of us have had a conversation about the care we want when we're seriously ill or nearing the end of life. Sharing your wishes with friends, family, and care providers now and as life changes may improve quality of life at the end of life, both for you and those you love. This conversation may be difficult, but wouldn't you rather have it now, before a crisis? It's time to have the conversation. Visit iom.edu/theconversation. A message from the Institute of Medicine.
The Home Energy Assistance Program, known as HEAP, can help make winter feel a little warmer for income-eligible families. This program provides financial grants to help pay heating or utility bills. If you receive HEAP benefits, you'll qualify for Central Hudson's Bill Discount Program. Find out if you are eligible for HEAP by contacting your County Department of Social Services or by visiting the Assistance Programs section of centralhudson.com.
Hi, this is Eleanor Arrow from the town of Ulster, and I support Kingston Community Radio, and so should you.
And you're with us here at KCR, Kingston Community Radio, AM 920, 92.5 FM, and streaming online at mykcr.org. 7:31 a.m. this morning, right? Thank you for being with us. And this upcoming portion of Kingston Community Radio is brought to you by Central Hudson. And we welcome you to call in, 331-9255. Don't forget our number, 331-9255 is something else you put on your refrigerator. And partly cloudy today with a high of 27. And tonight, 21 is the low, and snow showers are possible. We've got a 50% chance of snow showers. You'll notice a little dusting this morning as you wake up from overnight. And Tuesday, partly cloudy skies with a few flurries or snow showers possible, about a 20% chance of that. And Tuesday night, 8 degrees, clear skies. And that's the low of 8 degrees. And Wednesday, mainly sunny, high around 20. We don't get too warm on Wednesday, and we certainly don't get too warm Wednesday night. It goes down to -2 degrees Fahrenheit. And let's get back to the on-air studio with our Dr. Ed Aldio and Anthony Amanovich. How did I do?
That was good effort. That's
Okay.
Eminovich, yeah.
I'm sorry, can you say it?
Eminovich.
Amanovich,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We're back here, and we're talking about trusts and wills, and then we left on a discussion about safe deposit boxes. And there's a safe deposit box that most banks have. In my understanding, well, there's two kinds. You could have a safe deposit box, I think, that you could put in a corporate name, and you can do it in an individual's name. And when an individual dies, the bank, tell me if I'm correct on this, Anthony, the bank can lock the box so you can't get in. Why do they do that? And what's the difference between that and a corporation having a box?
Well, I think the thinking is with a bank is they're concerned, obviously, as to who is actually going to open the box and who's going to be taking out of the box whatever's in the box. So they need to make sure that if you are someone who can have access to the box, that that you have some kind of authority from the courts, hence the need to go to court to get an order just to open a box, which frequently has nothing in it, which is always the case. But the worst thing about it, I mean, we go back to the whole probate proceeding and how much of a headache that can be. On the petition form itself, you have the question, have you done your due diligence in searching out safe deposit boxes? Now, that therefore means if you know of a safe deposit box, you have to have access to see what's in the safe deposit box, because then you'd be, well, effectively not telling the truth if you're signing a petition saying that you did. But having it in a corporation's name does avoid the need for the banks to insist on an order because there's someone else named alongside.
Because the corporation is considered like its own individual?
Its own individual, yeah.
But, I was talking to one banker, and maybe she wasn't the most educated, I must say not the brightest, but the most educated regarding that. And she said, oh, no, we can still open the box. So some banks don't even know the rules.
No.
Some bankers don't know the rules.
No, I know. I run into a lot of that with banks, unfortunately.
And I think people think that they can, I think the biggest reason that the government is interested in what's in your safe deposit box because they want to know how much money is in there that you haven't accounted for. But in reality, you can put things in your safe deposit box, even cash, as long as you can justify where it came from. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And are you presumably referring to Medicaid? Are you going back to the...
Well, either way, just in general, that if they open the box and they find money in there, the government can say, well, you got to pay tax on that now.
Yeah, absolutely, because it belongs to you. So it therefore follows, if it belongs to you, it's taxes that might well be owed by you. So, yeah. I mean, for purposes of probate, though, with a safe deposit box, ultimately it's about knowing what actually exists that's out there and what is the size of your estate, because then there are taxes owed, then there are court filing fees owed, and then there are all sorts of other things owed.
Speaking of taxes, isn't there a death tax?
When you say debt, New York has what's called estate taxes, which is where you're taxed on the size of your estate.
How big can your estate be now?
As things stand, New York's 5 million plus. Federally, it's 10 million. So that's it's quite high, and a lot of people don't fall into that category. But those that do need to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, I remember about 10 years ago, it was only like $270,000 or some number like that, which is everybody's house today. Can you imagine New York City, or even here, $270,000? All the houses now are 200 plus, and then most of them are 300. So your house is gone immediately.
Yeah. And don't be surprised if we go back to those levels in the future. So
why do you say that?
Well, I gather that there are some discussions about changes that are coming down the pike. I think 2026 is going to see a significant change in the tax thresholds. But also, I gather, and it hasn't been confirmed yet, but they're looking at potentially removing what's called the step-up in basis, which would impact an awful lot of families. And that would be quite something for tax purposes.
What do you mean step up in basis?
When I say step up in basis, I mean the ability for a beneficiary to receive the value of an asset as at the date of death. Okay, so if Dad leaves me a house and it's worth $300,000, then upon his death, because his will says I get the house, I'm taxed as though I'm receiving it at $300,000. That's called the step up in basis. It's being mooted, it hasn't been confirmed, so I don't know at this moment in time, but I'm hearing that it's coming down and it's getting some traction.
So in other words, if you have a house that's paid for and the person who owns the house has the bases, they put all this money into their house, so they have their bases. So if they were to sell the house, they'd pay no tax, whereas if the beneficiary, and they step up in bases, which means they ignore the bases, and now the guy gets a 40% tax on top of his $300,000?
Oh, it's as though if the step up in basis is removed, then the son who receives the house receives it as though it's
income.
When Dad first bought it,
Yeah.
the value at maybe $100,000. So that's the difference between what son subsequently sells it for, and it can be quite big.
Well, and people should be listening to this because, when we mention the word tax, people kind of shut down. Like, I don't know anything about tax. I don't want to talk about taxes. But they don't realize that two things happen. A, if you don't understand tax, like in this case, the government will tax you. If you don't understand your assets, the government will tax you. If you don't understand how to protect your assets going forward if you get hurt and you end up in a nursing home, the government will tax you and take your assets. We think that this only happens in totalitarian governments. but in essence, this democracy of ours allows the government to take some poor SOB's estate because he has an estate. It doesn't have to be a big estate. It can be any estate.
Absolutely. You don't have to have an awful lot of money to be affected by this. It really is right across the board. Yeah.
And I think some people don't even understand what the value of their estate is. It could be 100,000. It could be $1 million. But they don't understand that.
Absolutely.
And
And
you ever run into that? Say, look what you own. And they go, oh.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with these life insurance policies, they're mesmerised by just how much pays out on death, and some of them don't even realise that they have these policies in place.
I mean, they don't know how much that their beneficiary will get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why are they surprised?
Yes.
That's pretty interesting. That's because, again, people don't pay attention. And same thing about insurance. I think they don't care. They don't care about insurance, and so they just ignore it, ignore the word.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
But so sort of like taxes. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about dying. And the old saying, everybody's going to die.
Death and taxes.
Death and taxes.
That's exactly it.
We used to say the government could do two things well: collect taxes and protect the mainland. I don't know if they can do either one anymore.
But just know that there's a mechanism in place to try to protect your estate as best as possible, but also your assets while you're alive. There's a difference between avoidance and evasion. Okay, now evasion is not what is what we're doing. It's avoidance, and that's a perfectly legitimate legal means at which you can protect your assets and estates.
Well, who tries to evade?
Well, let's talk about offshore trusts, shall we?
I don't even know that. See, I don't know that one. I know what they are, but
it's typically offshore trusts, and then that's what the government are keen to clamp down on, especially the ability to avoid paying taxes when taxes are due.
When you're alive or dead.
Both, I guess. Yeah.
You don't have any offshore trusts?
No, I don't. Not wealthy enough to have, but.
Well, I think that's one that most people don't have to be concerned about, unless you're money laundering or something, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, there's Chase Bank down here. Is that what it's called? Down in the mall. I went there once, and this woman said, "Can you deposit?" This friend of mine deposit this money for me. So it was a check and a $50 bill. They wouldn't take the $50 bill. I was like, why not? Well, you're not on the account. I said, well, it's her money. Here's the check, and here's the $50. They go, oh, we can't accept it. I go, like, that's money laundering, $50?
Right.
So, it's two extremes. Yeah. In our country, we have extremes. Do they have extremes in England, too?
Well, they're equally as strict in England about money laundering. That's for sure. And it's interesting you mentioned about the threshold being 260,000 10 years ago. I mean, when I left the UK 12 years ago, the threshold for taxes, inheritance taxes, was I think it was £350,000. So it caught a lot of estates out. That's for sure. So the threshold here in New York is a lot higher than it is in the UK. That's for sure.
It may change.
It may change. 2026. That's the year we're looking at.
Dr. Kirscher just came in. You hear that, Dr. Kirscher? Your estate may be tax more money when you die.
If I have any.
Oh, how modest! You have a house.
Yes.
It's interesting. It's still so. We have the trust, irrevocable trust. We have a will and last testament, and they're all different in the sense that when you die, there's a hierarchy, and if I get it right, which is a written will, which nothing. That's definitely probate. You have a will that is witnessed that could be probated a little bit, but a little quicker, safer, and then you have a trust which will avoid probate. Probate means the government comes in and looks at everything. Is that right?
Well, probate means you're avoiding, you have to utilize a court proceeding to transfer title of your assets. I just want to make it very clear as well, with a trust, that the skill behind establishing a really good trust plan is also to make sure that all of your assets that you have in your name is correctly titled in the name of the trust. Without that, then unfortunately, you might pass away with an asset in your own name, which you did not transfer into your trust, which would therefore mean, guess what? Probate.
Oh. So nothing's foolproof unless the attorney knows what you have, what you own.
Absolutely.
So you got to be upfront. So you can't have a girlfriend hiding a trust someplace for you and then die.
No, you couldn't, no.
See that, Dan? Keep that in mind.
I'm listening intensely. These are very, 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 very key items. And we live on, so we have to realize that all of our assets and
live on, but we die. Eventually.
Absolutely, of course.
So that's why it's important.
Even after we die, we live on because there's so many things to do.
So philosophical.
So many things
I like
to do.
that, Dan.
And that estate that you were responsible for in life has to be carried on to somebody else, and that's quite a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a lot of work. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, what are the scales between just writing down your own last will and testament and just writing it down without a lawyer's help, and as well as actually conferring with you and a lawyer and you the lawyer, and what that entails and how much more protection that is.
Well, we just discussed all that.
You did, definitely. Yeah, I was messing around technically in here, so I missed a little.
I'd like to give an example. I think the best way to explain is actually to give an example in the scenario. I had an estate a couple years ago where the lady passed away, but one day before she passed away, she hand wrote a will, and it was in pencil. And it was witnessed by two different people, and it was a valid last will and testament. But what happened was when we went to court to probate the will, it was unclear what she meant. So we then had to utilize what's called a construction proceeding, where we're trying to discover and clarify the intent of the person who passed away. And so that took a lot of time, and it was a long, drawn-out affair. So if there's a case to be made for why you should go and see an attorney to draft the will versus doing it yourself, that really is it, because it turned out to be a lot more work than simply going to see a lawyer to get it drawn up.
So that word intent becomes important. One last question, and then Dr. Kirchner is going to talk to us a little bit about dermatology. But
I was going to talk about trusts.
We can do that too. We can continue on if you'd like. How expensive is it to do a will or a trust?
Okay. Well, I think that's always a hard question to answer for an attorney. I can see you're sat there like, yeah, you're answering it. But
people ask me that question all the time. They say, that's why I have hearing aids in my practice. What happens there?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think it's, and I hate to be lawyer about it, but it really does depend on the situation, because it can range from something as simple where you're talking about for a last will and testament, maybe $400, $450, but it can range up to, say, $4,000 if you're talking about a well-planned trust, which incorporates all assets in the trust.
But that's worth it. People flinch at the amount of money, but when you think about it, it's important to their estate that they pay a maximum of $4,000, where they go out and buy a little four-wheeler or ATV for $6,000 and think nothing of it. And so anyhow, we'll put it in perspective. Listen, we appreciate you coming. I forgot to say something about your background in that you tell us
next time.
Next time, come back, will you?
I'll come back.
Because I think it's important. Okay. I think it's interesting. Thanks so much. Nice meeting you.
Nice
We'll
to
see
meet
you again.
Too. Absolutely, and thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move right along without a break.
Yeah, right. We have 10 more minutes before our next break.
Okay. That was an interesting conversation. Dr. Kirchner's here.
Boy, and I'm glad you're not asking me about trusts and wills, boy.
I know.
Nothing for you.
Yeah, and did you hear part of that?
I did.
It's pretty interesting. Most of us aren't that well educated and prepared to do that stuff.
No, well, there's a lot of as you just heard, legal definitions and distinctions that are hard to make, I think, for the average person.
And the other part is that I try to keep it medically oriented, but part of treating people, keeping them healthy, and bringing somebody like you in is also knowing that what is eventually going to happen to your health if it deteriorates, and what you have to do. And we talked about, here in the hospital you have I lost the term, medical trust. And if you don't have that,
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's lots of different ways to go, right? You can just let someone know what your wishes are, or your intent. You heard that word just a minute ago, but you can also, say that this person knows what I want, and go to them and ask them, and that way you don't have to spell it out. Because it's difficult to say, well, geez, if I'm on a ventilator and my chances of survival are this or that, or if I'm in heart failure or this and that, you can't.
but you have to have it written down, or you can't just point
absolutely.
unless they're a spouse. A spouse can make a decision, or a child, but generally otherwise you can't.
It's still very helpful to have a proxy. It's called a
Proxy,
healthcare
healthcare
proxy.
proxy.
Because, sometimes, and I've seen this, that, you're in the hospital and, dad is gone and mom is in there, and 3 kids have 3 very different opinions about what they think mom wants. And all of a sudden that sets up a real,
Tug of war.
yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. Well, anyhow, dermatology. Two things. I have a question about a term that I don't know, and maybe you can look at that. But meanwhile, let's talk about what happens during this time of year with the weather. And then you can explain that to me, because I never seen that stuff.
Oh yeah. That's medicalese, boy, and its
Yeah.
finest.
Yeah. So the essence of what it is, but later.
Sure.
So this time of year, how does this dry weather and cold affect us?
Well, it's dramatic, and I think most of your listeners can just attest to it, right? I mean, I know in the summer months I use almost no moisturizer, but I'm using lots of sunscreen, and as the autumn comes on, not a huge change, but as soon as the heat really kicks on, then everyone over 30 is really starting to dry out. It's what happens to us.
You're not talking about alcohol now.
No, well, after the new year, yes, but no. It was kind of interesting when I was a young person. I would see, people cream. I'm like, what the hell are these people talking about? Who cares about cream? But now that I'm almost 60, it's like, I have to put cream on regularly, or my skin gets really dry. And it's just the cause is just the low relative humidity, and then we heat that air up, and the relative humidity goes even lower. Of course, if you have a wood stove or hot air heat, it's worse. But everyone is, the relative humidity in any home is very low this time of year, and our skin gets dry. And
So when it gets dry, what happens?
well, several things. First of all, you get micro breaks in the skin. Right? Think of that parched river bed that you've seen in movies in Africa where the soil is all cracked, and you get those cracks in the skin, and that lets stuff in, bacteria and such, and so you're a little greater risk of infection. Certainly, dry skin tends to really itch, which drives many people crazy. I would say that's my number one complaint this time of year.
Right,
People
really?
come in and like, oh my gosh, I'm itching all over, and then when they scratch, that causes more breaks in the skin. And then that sets up inflammation, and then when it gets significant enough, we start calling that eczema. So now you have this dry, red, scaly, inflamed. That's one of the hallmarks of eczema. Is there's inflammation in the skin.
Doesn't sound real attractive.
No, and it makes people miserable. People really suffer from it. So, whenever I talk about treating anything on the skin, I go back to remember the old food pyramid.
Yeah.
Like, the bottom rung was very wide, and they were, that's fruits and vegetables and healthy grains and healthy meats. And then the next rung up, which is a smaller area, is, other things. And then when you get to the top, that's, candy and sweets and things you shouldn't be eating, alcohol and all those things. It's very, kind of the area of that box is supposed to represent how much you're supposed to do. Well, I draw that for patients all the time. And then the bottom rung of the pyramid, if I could use the word rung, is a big surface area. And I always tell them that's the cheap, safe, and easy thing to do in medicine. And the very top little peak of the pyramid that you really want to avoid, that's like would be the equivalent of chemotherapy, right? So, as you go through life, you want to do the cheap, safe, easy things that maybe aren't always easy. I mean, who wants to
like lotion? You mean?
Yeah, right. So putting on. So one of the things I say to patients is a really easy thing to do on that bottom rung is not use too much soap. Americans have a fetish with soap. I know as a kid growing up, it was, wash, 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 wash. You got to use soap all over all the time. And that's not really good for us, especially when we're not 18 anymore, right?
Why isn't? What does it do?
It dries us out more, especially some of the soaps.
Don't you have bacteria on your skin that's good?
Yes. Yeah, and it removes some of those. Now, certainly, and that's a really good point, certainly, especially in this age of COVID and everything else that's going around, yeah, you want to wash your hands, but as far as washing your body, there just aren't that many benefits, and there's a lot of bad that comes out of it. So,
people are cringing on that one. There's not many benefits to washing your body. Yes,
the body in general. I kind of talk to my patients like a normal person. I say, let's wash the dirty bits. Take and I really love like something like Dove soap, nice and mild soap, as opposed to I don't want to get in trouble. But Ivory and things like that are very drying. A lot of the deodorant or antibacterial soaps are really not necessary. But wash your armpits, your groin, your backside. Yeah, wash the dirty bits. The thing that you'd wash in a GI shower, as my mom always used to call it. But soaping up your arms and your legs and your chest. Especially as someone who's an adult. If you're a greasy 16-year-old boy, yeah, you better wash. But as a 50-year-old person, most of us just aren't that greasy, and we're not getting that dirty.
Is there some truth that you don't have to take a shower every day?
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of my patients, as they age, bathe less and less. I mean, if you looked at almost anyone in a nursing home, they're down to once a week with bathing. And
that must drive just think about that. I don't see anything wrong with it, except the family probably goes nuts.
Yeah.
You didn't wash her in a week.
Right.
Sue you.
Right. And, I mean, those are the two extremes, right?
Course,
I have young people who come in and they're showering 3 times a day. Some guy gets up, goes to the gym, he showers after the gym, he showers at night, and then they come in and they're like a brown leaf. Yeah, they're ready to crap.
They're all cracked. I have this fellow who I see every now and then, and I'm standing next to him, and I go like, I won't use his name. I'll call him Sam. I go, Sam, your deodorant's not working, man, at all. He goes, huh? I go, geez, yeah. He goes, well, I don't want to use deodorant because it's got aluminum in it. And I go, so I went to the health food store. Next time I saw it, I said, here, use this.
That's funny.
He still doesn't use it.
That's funny. Well, so that's actually, I'm glad you just said that. So there's a distinction. There's deodorant, and then there's antiperspirant. Antiperspirant helps you not to sweat, okay? And that affects the sweat glands. And that's the stuff that has aluminum in it. If it's not antiperspirant, if it's just deodorant, it won't have aluminum in it. And there are as you said, you went to the health food store, there are deodorants that have tea tree oil or eucalyptus, very natural things that...
Do they work?
Yeah.
Is it just like a smell you get instead?
No,
it doesn't stop sweating?
Well, what's interesting is our sweat doesn't smell. It's the bacteria that feed on the sweat that produce the odor. And that's why we have different sweat glands. Let's say on your outer arm where you're just perspiring, or on your forehead where you're perspiring. That's one thing. Those are eccrine glands, and then you have these apocrine glands that you have, in the armpits and in the groin, and they make a much more oily sweat that bacteria can actually thrive on. And so if you use something that's antibacterial, that will cut down on the odor. And many deodorants, not antiperspirants, many deodorants have some kind of antibacterial thing. Like, I'm not being a huge proponent of this, but some of the all-natural stuff you see, tea tree oil, for example. People come in to me all the time, I'm using tea tree oil to treat my fungus and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, it's not going to work. It actually is a fairly good antibacterial for deodorant and things like that, though.
But not for a fungus.
Right. I mean, not everything kills everything, right? So yeah, there's some stuff that really does kill bacteria or limits the bacterial growth that reduces your odor.
Keeps down that Sam's problem. And they don't know it. it's interesting that people
Right.
don't understand it.
Yeah.
They don't think about a skunk, that smells.
Right. Well, if you're around to smell long enough, you don't smell it anymore.
Right. But I can tell. And I had a guy in my office one time, professional, and I walked right by his door. I was like, I went back and I said, "You got to do something, man.
Right. Yeah.
It's not
working.
He didn't know it. He
Yeah.
didn't know it. He thanked me for it.
Yeah. Right.
But most people get embarrassed. They don't want to say anything.
Well, they might get embarrassed, but in the end, like you said, they're probably thankful that you said something,
Yeah.
right? Because
I mean, most people are embarrassed to say something.
right.
But either way. So back to the dry skin and all that. What, we got 1 minute. We'll
Yeah.
talk about dry skin. Want to do it now or what, Dan? We're not ready
Oh,
yet?
no. We've got 1 minute, so
Okay.
we can.
I just want to say
we
Dan
can
smells fantastic.
He what?
He smells fantastic.
He does. You
Yeah.
smell him? Dan, what you got your peachy oil on?
I'm not sure what I did. Thank you, Doctor Kirsten.
So, well, this is interesting. I think it's important for people to understand this time of year what happens to them. And how their skin flakes and cracks and even bleeds in some cases, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then just there's an old adage in dermatology: better than riches is scratches for itches. Itch can really drive people nuts. It's severe itch is maddening. Think about the worst poison ivy you've ever had, right? I mean, you just can't almost take your mind off of it. It's so present and omnipresent.
Okay,
Okay, we're going to take a break on the omnipresent thing. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Dr. Kirshner, and thank you, Dr. Ed Alio. You're with us here at KCR, Kingston Community Radio, AM 920 and 92.5 FM. The time is now 8 o'clock a.m., and it's 17 degrees here in Uptown Kingston. This last portion of Kingston Community Radio was brought to you by Central Hudson. And as we said, 17 degrees. So it's going to go up to about 20, 22. And we'll be right back after these messages.
Millions of conversations will happen today, but few of us have had a conversation about the care we want when we're seriously ill or nearing the end of life. Sharing your wishes with friends, family, and care providers now and as life changes may improve quality of life at the end of life, both for you and those you love. This conversation may be difficult, but wouldn't you rather have it now, before a crisis? It's time to have the conversation. Visit iom.edu/theconversation. A message from the Institute of Medicine.
The Home Energy Assistance Program, known as HEAP, can help make winter feel a little warmer for income-eligible families. This program provides financial grants to help pay heating or utility bills. If you receive HEAP benefits, you'll qualify for Central Hudson's Bill Discount Program. Find out if you are eligible for HEAP by contacting your County Department of Social Services or by visiting the Assistance Programs section of centralhudson.com.
Hi, my name's Maggie. I'm from Copiague, and I support Kingston Community Radio, and so should you.
You're with us here at KCR, Kingston Community Radio, WGHQ, AM 920 and 92.5 FM, the home of Kingston Community Radio, as we say. And my name is Dan Gatis. It's 8:02 a.m., and this upcoming portion of Kingston Community Radio is brought to you by Herzog's. Stop by Herzog's Home and Paint Center in the Kingston Plaza for all of your home building, maintenance, and painting needs, and discover the difference of buying local. And visit Herzogs.com because you'll find sales, ongoing sales, at Herzogs.com. Weather and forecast for Kingston and surrounding areas. Partly cloudy today with a high of 27, only going up to the 27. And then a possibility of snow showers tonight, about a 50% chance of snow, and a low of 21. Tuesday, partly cloudy skies, a few flurries or snow showers possible with a high of 39. And Tuesday night, clear skies, a low of 8. Bang. That's pretty low. And then Wednesday, we only get up to about 20 degrees, mainly sunny with a high around 20. And Wednesday night, bitterly cold. It's a negative 2 degrees on Wednesday night. Let's get back to the on-air studio now with Dr. Ed Alio and Dr. Kirshner. Welcome back.
Kirscher. You said Kirshner?
I did. Kirscher, thank you very
the
much.
Kirshner's were the lawyers and what
Don
was
Kirshner.
Lou
The deli,
concert,
the deli people.
deli guys. Yeah. Lou Kirshner's to have a deli,
Lou
who's
Kirshner.
also our treasurer,
Okay.
county treasurer for
Yes, I was-
20-some years.
Yep.
But this is Kirscher. And it's K-I-R, right? C-H-E-R?
Yep, Kircher. Yep.
Kirscher. Which is, nobody gets that right, do they?
No.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's okay. You know, I'm the seventh kid. All our names begin with the letter K, so I'm used to I just answer to "Hey you." You know, one of those things.
KK?
One of us.
I forgot where we left off.
So you had mentioned lotion, and I feel like you're feeding me all these gems here. One of the other things I stress to my patients is there's liquids which aren't moisturizing. There's lotions that usually come out of a pump. You know, you're pushing on a thing and it's squirting out of a little nozzle. And those are moisturizing, but not super well moisturizing. The technology is getting better. And then there's creams. And creams usually you have to scoop out of a tub, or sometimes you can get them out of a tube. But and then there's ointment, which is really greasy stuff. The classic ointment is plain old-fashioned Vaseline. And so, ointment is the most moisturizing, but not many people want to use that because it feels greasy. And cream is the next step down. And that's what I'm actually often pushing for my patients to use, because a lot of folks come in saying, I'm using lotion out of the pump, and they're still really dry. And I say, well, you should bump it up to cream, because cream will be more moisturizing. And there's a bunch of creams that are pretty smart these days that aren't too greasy feeling. I'm not plugging any one brand, but Cetaphil makes a great one. Aveeno, CeraVe, Eucerin, all the big brands you've heard of.
That Eucerin, which I've seen, and I think, matter of fact, you recommended it one time for me. Not that I'm plugging it, but it's in a pump.
Right. Well, they also make lotions, because in the end, those companies want to sell you something.
The one that was in a jar was like sticky.
Right. And Eucerin's kind of an interesting company. They actually have probably 5 different grades of cream.
Right.
So still very moisturizing, but they actually put little water droplets, like a little logo on the jar to be a scale, like how many jalapeno peppers would be on hot sauce. So they have a 1 water droplet thing, which is a moisturizer, but 2 would be thicker and more moisturizing, all the way up to 5, which is like really heavy, thick.
Cream.
All cream, but more greasy cream, but certainly the more greasy, the better as a moisturizer. But there's that happy medium there, right? If you're making someone so greasy they feel gross putting it on, and they feel like they can't get dressed, or their clothes are getting stained, because Vaseline is super cheap, and wears a great moisturizer, but it's just a pain to use. So there's always finding that happy medium of a decent cream that works for people.
I was using this stuff called Palmer's, cocoa butter, and I used to use the pump. But after I shower and stuff, and
that might be adequate for you, right? That might just be fine. But I see a lot of folks come in and they say, "Oh, I put lotion on every day, and I'm still dry." And I'm like, "Well, you're using kind of a lightweight thing, so maybe we ought to bump it up a little bit."
yeah,
cream.
That's pretty interesting. I don't use it anymore. I use the Eucerin.
Yeah.
Stuff, that you directed me to do. But I find that interesting that people don't. Well, generally, sort of like the Wills thing, they don't understand the difference between
Sure.
moisturizers and creams and
Lotions versus ointments, all that stuff. Yeah.
So that's quite the education.
Yeah. So I keep it simple for folks. I always tell them, look for something that's in a tub or a jar. It's easy, and then you'll find one you like. But
I
most of them
never
are
look
pretty
at
smart.
tubs and jars. Really, I don't.
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
look at a bottle.
Right.
What do you look at, Dan? You don't use it because you're all cracked.
No, I'm just as much of a victim as everybody else. I found this incredible tub that comes from Joe.
Yeah, I know the natural food thing.
Joe's
Natural store, rather.
What's it called? Out of context, I can't remember it. But it is extraordinary, and I looked online and found about 5 of those tubs, because I don't get to Joe's. What's the name of that store? They're local, they're like IKEA. There's only a few of them around. But it was astounding. It was astounding. And
Well, if it's so good,
and,
Dan, how
it's
come your
good.
fingers are all cracked?
Oh, they're not.
I thought you
they're
said
not
that.
unless I'm just unless I'm neglecting it. Yeah.
Well, that's
I'm
it.
just
You
teasing
actually
him.
have to put that stuff on, right?
Yeah, you got to put it on. But I've always found that to be extraordinary, and it is like a heavy or thick cream that you use. There's a few others that seem to work really well. Musher's Secret is really, really good for the dogs, for instance.
Sure.
And that is a balm also.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes a how thick of a something do you want to put on it? So
Right.
I wash my hands so much and I Purell so much at the office that I use some really, really super thick stuff on my hands. But that's not something I'd want to try and spread on my body. It would just be hard to do physically.
Well, with all the disinfectants that we're using now, I find my hands get all dry, and I have to put lotion on.
Yeah.
Just because of that, because
Yeah.
they're like, holy cow.
Yeah, I'm doing it half a dozen times a day at the office because I get so dry.
You walk in and out of a room, you got to disinfect.
Right, I wash before every patient, I Purell after every patient, I step in the next room and wash again, and Purell on the way out again. So it adds up very quickly. Yeah.
It certainly does. So, speaking of our skin and stuff, the brown spots, where are they? Are they from dry skin?
No, well, there's lots of different types of brown spots, so it's hard to generalize, right? I'm of an age now, where I have brown spots all over my hands. One day I woke up and I looked down and said, "Oh my God, it's my father's arm. What happened to me?" But we get lots of brown spots for lots of reasons. Certainly, we get them most commonly on the hands just because of sun exposure, and our hands are exposed most of the time. If you think about it, even in the cool autumn months, October, your hands are still exposed. We're not wearing gloves yet, and so the hands and the face take the biggest beating in that regard. And then there's a lot of genetic reasons to get them. We all, if you look at your parents and they've had a lot of spots, the chances are you're going to wind up with a lot of spots. But the real concern, though, is you don't want to say, "Oh yeah, mom had a lot of spots, I have a lot of spots, or dad did," and
No big deal. But
there's always that the dangerous one lurking, and it's again, as like your last guest was saying, it's hard to know what to do in every situation, and that's where I'm not making a plug for people to come into me necessarily, but seeing even your primary care doctor is really vital, just to get a look at once in a while to
But I'll say this. You don't have to say it. Most primaries don't look you all over like that. They take the tuning fork out and hit your knee, and or they'll look at your ears, but they don't necessarily look at your body or look at your back.
No,
Not many people can see their back, by the way.
Right. Yeah, even with a mirror, it's very difficult, or two mirrors. Yeah. No, and I totally get that. And once upon a time, a long, long time ago, I was a board-certified family physician. I did that residency. I did that whole thing. And I have tremendous respect for all the primary care providers. They're covering a lot of turf, man. They're checking people for diabetes and hypertension and managing all these other very complex medical issues. And it's hard to have a one-stop shop that they can do everything, right? That would be an hour and a half visit, and the medical model, they'd be living in the poorhouse if they were trying to do everything for everyone at every visit. It's not possible.
Yeah, and it's true because they don't get to see everything, so they don't miss anything, but they go for the important stuff: your heart, your lungs. Do you have any cancers? So, like in my, like they never check anybody's hearing. I'm in the hearing world.
Sure.
It's hard to do, and it's time consuming. But they rather, would you rather have an EKG or a hearing test?
Right.
So priorities.
Right. And are there professionals out there who can do that for you better than they can, right?
Yeah.
Then a lot of them aren't really doing eye exams. So, they don't have the equipment nor the expertise to really take that deep dive and really look at your retinas and all the things that, all those things, right?
Matter of fact, I don't think, the last couple of times I've been in, I don't think anybody looked in my eye or my ear, but they do the other stuff.
Right.
And so people tend to ignore that themselves. And I guess dermatology is one area that is probably in the hierarchy of things that people forget. People, not the physicians.
No, absolutely. And, especially in COVID, I have just lots of folks who had a visit, and we were in some kind of COVID surge, whether it's, initially or Delta or Omicron, whatever, and they don't feel comfortable coming out, and so that appointment gets canceled, and then it just, like you're saying, it's not a high priority thing, so they kind of fall off the map a little bit,
And if they have a problem, the problem snowballs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
which is really sad. Besides the bad weather, let's talk just a second about skin issues. Like there's a boil, and then there's a cracked skin, and then there's
Oh my gosh, the Bible, if you will, of dermatology is I think it's like 1,700 pages in several volumes. So there's a lot out there in skin. The skin is this huge immune organ, and so many things that happen are expressed on or in the skin, and so there's so much to it.
I always talk about skin cancers. What is it? What's the difference between a skin cancer and a boil, for example?
Well, a boil is, that's kind of a layperson's term. There's two different things. You could have literally an infection in your skin that is now, has pus in it, which is a collection of dead white blood cells, and you have this abscess, and it's, you have this pocket of that stuff, and probably some bacteria or something like that in there. And then there's cysts that get inflamed, and a cyst is a malformed hair follicle, and in that cyst collects all the dead skin cells and oil, all the oil that would have normally come out over time onto your skin to lubricate your skin, as we've been talking, but that all gets trapped in there. And then if that breaks under the skin, that turns into what we, medically would call a foreign body reaction. Your body treats that like it's a splinter, and those cysts can get incredibly red, hot, and painful. And your body's trying to expel the thing, and they get so red, hot, and painful that the skin on top will eventually break, and all that stuff will ooze out, and then, that gives your body a chance to heal it from the inside out. And so usually, we're living at a time where, we're not in frontier days where you throw a little sassafras sap on it and suck it up. People come in, and we often open those things up for people and clean them out with some numbing medication, so that we're not being brutal to them. And
Are they pretty common?
cysts are very, very common.
Do they reoccur on some people?
Oh, definitely. Some people are really prone. I have some people who have 50 or 100 cysts. Yeah, it can be really devastating, But I have lots of folks who are walking around with a cyst or two that they've had for 30 years, and they never bother them. And when they come in, I say, if it's not bugging you, don't leave it alone. If it isn't broken, don't fix it, because there's always a risk of doing anything to anybody, right? Anytime you cut into somebody, there's an inherent risk with that. But certainly if it's an abscess, and especially due to an infection, you really do want to drain that, because the body, once there's that pocket of pus in there, it's really difficult for the body to fight that bacteria off.
So if it's a top, do you use a topical antibiotic for these things, or do you do?
No. Again, if as describing like a boil, you could imagine that goes down pretty deep, and a topical thing just wouldn't get in there to where the meat is. And opening up, if it's really infectious, opening it up, there's another old adage, there's nothing better for an abscess than cold steel and daylight, meaning you gotta get it open and get that stuff out of there so the body can start getting better blood flow and send its natural ability to fight off the bacteria in there. And then
I didn't recognize that adage. It sounds like a cowboy movie.
Yeah, well, it's a surgeon adage, but it's true. There's some truth in some of those things. That I've had patients come in. And they have an abscess, and this is my third round of antibiotics, and I'm just not getting better. I'm saying, well, it's not getting in there. You have this pocket of stuff going on, and the antibiotic's not getting where the action is.
That's when you have to expose it to the elements.
You open it up, you drain that stuff out, and then the blood can really circulate in there. The antibiotic gets in there, and then they get better.
Which brings me to the next point about blood and skin. When somebody has an abrasion, or a cut, or a burn, or they burn their finger, they cut their fingers on both sides, and somebody tapes it together. What does the blood do? How does the blood, how does it interact like clothes? What's the deal on that? How's it close?
Oh, well, there's a bunch of different stages to wound healing that are pretty complex. So, it won't
Make it
help
easy.
anybody. Yeah. Yeah, well, the first thing you do is, we all know you have platelets in your blood, right, that do the clotting. And so, if let's say you cut yourself or have an abrasion, whatever, you bleed, these platelets come out and they actually form a clot. And they actually knit together using a bunch of different chemicals in the blood, and they stop the bleeding, and the little capillaries are plugged up, and depending on how big the vessel is, right? If you cut into a real vein, it's not just going to plug, but then it starts to build a lattice and a surface to it, and then the body over a few days starts to, the skin cells that were injured die back a little bit to a healthy base and then start to regrow to recover the wound. It's actually kind of miraculous when you get into the detail of the thing. And that's where, when places like or products like Neosporin, they say, oh, look how quickly this healed with Neosporin. And I think it's mostly the ointment base, getting back to our distinctions between creams and ointments, that moisture that allows the skin cells to migrate well and it creates a good environment for healing. And in the case of Neosporin or bacitracin, something like that, there's a weak antibiotic component to it too. But I think really it's the ointment in those products that do the bulk of the benefit for you. But
I think that's interesting in itself, because we're talking about cracked skin and healing. So it's all about
the immune system again and again and again, right? You have this cracked skin. Things are getting in that are really irritating your immune system, and your immune system's trying to protect you. So you start getting white blood cells in the skin and trying to fight off any bacteria that might be trying to get in. And that then revs up the inflammation. Where if you can restore that barrier. Because if you think about it, why do we have skin? It's kind of amazing. You have this incredibly complex, set of organs, right? And you got to cover it with something. But why? It's like, well, it keeps water in your body, right? Human beings evolved. We're struggling to keep the inside of us moist, but it also keeps the outside out, and those are often very harmful things: viruses, bacteria, all kinds. Things that are just toxic to us. And so, when your skin's not healthy and you have those micro breaks, things are getting in. The studies are super clear. Like kids with atopic dermatitis or have a history of eczema, the bacteria counts of their skin are way up compared to a kid who doesn't have
For
that.
the listener, what is atopic dermatitis? Explain that to them.
Atopic dermatitis is a tendency toward eczema. And we see it typically a couple of different things, and it's related to a couple of other conditions that maybe your listeners can relate to. So let's talk about hay fever. So, maybe you breathe in pollen, and no big deal. I breathe in pollen, and my eyes are itchy and red, and my nose is runny, and I'm coughing, and I have all those hay fever symptoms. That's because my body is being hyper responsive to that pollen. It's creating inflammation. So some people, they have that similar thing in the skin. Their immune system is hyper responsive, so they get exposed to a fragrance or a chemical, a preservative in a cream, a lotion, what have you, and it aggravates their immune system. They're having an allergic-ish response to it. The other thing about atopic dermatitis is their skin tends to be dry, as I already mentioned, and then that stuff gets in more easily, right? And so that stuff gets in, and then they have an over-responsive immune system. And so, I see little kids, 2 months old, that come in, and they can't itch yet because they don't have the fine motor coordination, but I've seen 2 months old rubbing their face on the bed, because they itch so much already. And so atopic dermatitis, like hay fever or asthma, some people breathe in animal dander and their airways get mucousy and closed down and they can't breathe. They have this hyper-responsive immune system. And so that's the same type of thing that happens in atopic dermatitis. In fact, that we call it the atopic triad, the three things that go together. And you often see this in the same patient, that they have eczema, they have asthma, and they have seasonal allergies. And those three things all have that hyper-responsive immune system. So going back to my food pyramid model of things, we want to really lubricate the heck out of their skin to restore that barrier function as best we can. And then we want to calm down the inflammation, and like treating eczema, you might put some cortisone on that patient. There are other medications too, but cortisone is the mainstay. And then you want to do things to maybe reduce itch, like antihistamine, like you'd give someone Allegra or Zyrtec or Benadryl if they were having a lot of seasonal allergies. And that helps to take care of that end of it. And so it's kind of this multifactorial thing, but it often comes back to restoring the functionality of the skin by keeping it moist. And that kind of brings us back to eczema where we started.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can go all the way back around here. I'm trying to think of some of the things we talked about before that people need to think about. I know that when we have the sun out, we talk about skin cancers, and now
sunscreen, and hats, all the stuff.
Yeah. But now I think people, or I should say, are they less aware of their skin cancer problems because it's not summer and hot? Do they kind of ignore what they see on their skin as a result?
I think so. I think folks, we often, you touch a hot stove, you get pain in your hand. There's a pretty good correlation there. Don't touch the stove. Often people will come in the summer saying, "Oh, I had a sunburn 2 weeks ago, and I'm worried about getting skin cancer." But most of us don't think that, hey, what we did 40 years ago when we were lifeguarding, or running around the fields or woods when we were kids, or hanging out on the beach or boating or whatever when we were kids, leaves a real mark, and the skin never forgets. It really doesn't. The damage. I worked on a farm as a kid. And I remember riding around on a farm tractor in a pair of cut-off jean shorts and a pair of sneakers and nothing else, baking in the sun all day long. And I know I did myself terrible damage, but back in the day, it was no one thought about it. I can hear my mom say, "Go outside and get some sun. You get some vitamin D." Which, by the way, a lot of people really still believe in. But after about 13 minutes of sunlight, even less, and depending on your latitude, you really don't need any more sun to get your vitamin D level for the day. It's those receptors are saturated. Anything else after that is just harmful.
I think you might want to repeat that. So you do need vitamin D.
Absolutely, and I take vitamin D every day, by the way, because that is one vitamin that has been shown to really promote your health and to be good for you. But being out for more than 10 minutes or so, your vitamin D receptor, for the sun are saturated. And so anything beyond that 10 minutes or so is just
Are you talking about just your head and your hands, or your whole body?
Well, any part of you. The bit that's on your hands, let's say your hands are exposed for 10 minutes, those receptors are done for the day. Your face or your neck, those are done for the day. But I have people who kind of want to make themselves feel better about going out and cooking for an hour or two and laying out by the pool. "Oh, I need my vitamin D." Well, okay, the first 8 or 10 minutes, okay, that was great. Now you're fooling yourself. Yeah.
And you're setting yourself up for something else.
Right.
So how often should people have a physical regarding, their skin or dermatology? And what is involved in a physical, by the way?
Yeah, those are two really good questions. Well, what I do, and crazy as it seems, people come in and say, "No, I don't want you to look me all over. I want you to look at this spot on my arm. That's it. I'm not taking my clothes off," which drives me crazy. But, whatever. I'm here to help in any way I can. When people come to my office, men and women alike, I ask them to get down to just their underpants. Women, we give them a gown. Most of the guys just sit there in their skivvies, and I look people over head to toe. If people have thinning hair or they're bald like me, I start at the top of their scalp and get down to the bottom of their feet. I don't typically examine people's genitals unless they say, "Hey, I have a spot on my penis or my vulva," and I say, "Great, let's take a look." But I try to give everyone a really good full body check because, you think melanoma and things like that occur mostly in high sun exposure areas, and that's absolutely the case. But I have several patients who are missing a toe or have had major foot surgery because we found melanoma on the bottom of their foot or between their toes, and people just don't think about that as a risk area, and it is a low risk area, but it certainly happens. So that's what's involved in a visit. The good thing is it takes, 5 or 7 minutes to give someone a really good look over, and then we can talk about their issues, whatever, concerns they have. And then how often or who, That's a really good question. There are no national guidelines for that. So it's not like, hey, when you're 50, you should have a colonoscopy, or you should start checking this when you have, a mammogram, whatever. It doesn't exist. And very different people are at very different risks. So picture a white Irish or Scottish person who is a roofer. Well, they need to come in frequently. They have tremendous sun exposure, and they're a very high risk group. Or someone who's very dark skinned, an African American or a dark Greek or Latin person, much less likely to have skin cancer, but certainly not likely to have skin cancer. My favorite, this is my first year of practice, I had a woman who was Greek came in, and I said, I want to give you a good look over. And she says, I'm Greek. My people have been living in the sun for thousands of years. And, but she capitulated. I got her undressed and found a melanoma on her thigh. And she was flabbergasted, and I said, yeah, it can happen to anybody. African Americans, Nigerians, black people get melanoma. Not as commonly, but they do. And so it's a wide range.
Well, people don't think about that, but I know that, if you're Irish and you're white and blue-eyed and red hair, and we should talk about redheads in a minute because that's another high-risk area, but I think Dan wants to take a break here. Dan, please.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, doctors. And we're here with Dr. Kirscher and Dr. Ed Alio, and thank you so much for being with us, too. And we are here at the bottom of the hour with KCR, Kingston Community Radio, AM 920 and 92.5 FM, and streaming online at mykcr.org. It's 19 degrees on this Monday, January 24th, and this last portion of Kingston Community Radio has been brought to you by Herzog's. Stop by Herzog's Home and Paint Center in the Kingston Plaza for all of your home building and maintenance and painting needs, and discover the difference of buying local. And you can look at herzogs.com for ongoing sales. We'll be right back after these messages.
Your daughter doesn't want to talk about why her room is a horrible mess. Your son doesn't want to talk about why he's wearing mismatching socks. Your spouse doesn't want to talk about their bad haircut. Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk to plan for an emergency. Pack basic supplies in a go bag: water, canned food, flashlights, batteries, medical supplies, IDs, and some cash. Talk about where you'll meet in case you lose one another. And of course, don't forget to pack the dog treats. Talk to your family and make an emergency plan. Go to nyc.gov/readyny or call 311 to make your family's emergency plan. Brought to you by New York City Emergency Management and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Cameron Rylance from Kingston, and I support Kingston Community Radio because it's informative.
And you're here with us at KCR, Kingston Community Radio, AM 920 and 92.5 FM, 19 degrees on this Monday, January 24th. Partly cloudy today with a high of 27, and tonight a low of 21 with a 50% chance of snow happening over the night. And Tuesday, partly cloudy skies, a few flurries or snow showers possible, continuing, and it's a high of 39. Tuesday night, 8 degrees is the low, and clear skies. Wednesday, mainly sunny, a high around 20 degrees on Wednesday, and Wednesday night, bitterly cold, going down to negative 2 degrees. And you're with us here at KCR, Kingston Community Radio, AM 920 and 92.5 FM. Just a quick announcement. There were no birthdays today submitted, but we're going to give a shout out to Frank. Frank's birthday is today, and that's from Mom Evelyn and brother and sister. Happy birthday, Frank. From Mom, Evelyn, brother, and sister. And You're with us here at KCR, Kingston Community Radio, AM 920 and 92.5 FM. This upcoming portion of Kingston Community Radio is brought to you by Ulster Savings Bank. Many locations throughout the Mid-Hudson Valley, one right near you. Let's get back to the on-air studio with Dr. Ed Alio and Dr. Kirscher.
Well, it took a dip. Okay, we're back. This is Dr. Ken Kirshner and myself, Ed Alio, and we're talking about dermatology. And I mentioned the word redhead. We're going to come back to redheads in a minute because they're beautiful people. But we're going to talk about tanning because, in the summer, people are out in the sun, like we talked about, and they're baking themselves. And now there's no sun, but they go to these really safe places, tanning booths. What do you think about that?
They're the worst. Yeah, tanning is just terrible. There's no such thing as safe tanning, period. People say, well, I just want to get a base or...
What makes them think that it's okay? I mean, they say it's, the people who are promoting it say it's okay. It's natural looking and natural.
Right. Yeah, well, they want to sell you something, right? So
that ultraviolet rays that they have artificially coming through there is...
Right, and so you get back to physics and whatnot, an ultraviolet ray is this photon of light, this little packet of energy that penetrates the skin, and it hits your DNA. That's how that all works, right? So this little packet of energy hits your DNA and damages it. And if you damage that piece of DNA enough times, cells get a little weird. They don't grow properly. They don't stop growing properly. And that's really, if you think about what cancer is, it's uncontrolled growth of a cell. It's because all cells are supposed to grow old, and die, and a new cell, just like people, are going to come and take their place. But so the more time you spend tanning, much greater risk of getting skin cancer. I have a very young woman in the office who worked at a tanning salon for several years as a young teenager, and she tanned all the time. And she's 20 years old, and she's had 3 melanomas at 20.
Oh, my gosh.
And any one of those could be a life-ending event for her. So it's really, it's a very dangerous thing. And the hard part is, people of all ages tan, of course, but a lot of young people tan. And you remember how invincible we all felt when we were young.
Right.
Something as innocuous as laying in a tanning booth for 10 or 15 minutes. How could that really hurt me? But, I think it's the same thing that, young people face with cigarettes. Oh, I'll just have a couple, no big deal. I feel fine. I never felt better, right? But, that slowly adds up over time and does real harm.
When I think about the tanning booths, they think that, and it's interesting how people who have, different backgrounds historically, like, I'm Italian, so, we have some a little darker skin. Irish and the Germans are a lot lighter. So it's interesting how we're attracted to the opposite. One of the women that I know, she wants to be darker.
Right.
And people like me, when I was a kid, they used to harass me because I was so dark.
Right, sure.
And they used to call me names. So it was 90 degrees out, and I'd have a long sleeve sweatshirt on. Only my hands would show,
right.
So they couldn't see how dark I was.
Sure. In some cultures, people who have gotten a tan are thought of as working class, right? Or that was the stigma in the past, right? You had to be out working in the fields or the sun. In some Asian cultures, that's a very common thing. So
yeah, definitely. I have both my daughter-in-laws are Asian, and they walk around with umbrellas all the time.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be any darker.
Yeah.
Because of the connotation is something different to them.
Yeah. Yeah, but in the States here, and especially generations in from whatever culture we've come from, the general paradigm is, have that healthy glow. Think about the old Coppertone bottle.
Yeah, right.
All that stuff. But it really is not good for us. And then some people say, well, I want to get that base before I go on vacation, and again, you're just doing more damage before you even get to your vacation.
There's a big difference between getting a little darker from the sun and getting a little darker from a tanning booth, no?
They both are harmful. They both are harmful, yeah. I think the difficulty with tanning is that people make it habitual, but you could say that about people who, I have people who just are addicted to getting sun. I have people who just lay out all the time, and they've actually shown that there is almost a component of addiction for people who are really heavy tanners or heavy sunbathers. They've done studies where they've put they offered people free tanning, and they put ultraviolet shields blocking the harmful rays from one tanning booth, and they let people just pick whichever booth, A or B, they wanted to go into. And over time, people knew they didn't feel as good when they went to booth A, and they would all go to booth B. They knew on some level that they weren't getting that good feeling.
Unconsciously knew it. I knew a person who would lay out in her pool all day long with the sun and feel dizzy afterwards.
Wow.
That's absurd, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it tells you right there that's doing something that's
like
right?
addictive personality right there.
Yeah.
To the sun.
Yeah, it's not that uncommon.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to again light-skinned people and redheads. How are redheads different than an Irish person with dark hair?
Well, it's again, it's all genetic. So this is kind of an interesting thing. So the blackest Nigerian and the whitest, I'll pick on the Irishman, all have the same number of melanocytes in their skin. Melanocytes are the cells that make the pigment that we all have or don't have. It's just that a very dark person, their melanocytes over the millennia have learned to make big globules of dark pigment to protect the underlying cells, right? The sun hits that, and the darkness absorbs the sun and protects the cells underneath. A white person, their body never evolved that capacity because they come from a very northern latitude, right? They didn't get any sun. Their body didn't need to protect themselves from that. And so their melanocytes make a very light and small particled pigment. It's usually more red in color as opposed to dark brown or black, and that doesn't do as good a job blocking those ultraviolet rays that we were talking about getting into the skin. And so those same cells that make up the pigment in the skin make up the pigment in the hair.
Is this a recessive thing again?
No.
Do you have recessiveness in skin like you do with hair?
No,
or eyes?
No, it would be just what if you're if you go to Ireland, I think what people call the Black Irish. I think that really was when the Spanish had been in Ireland, and I think that's where that dark hair came from. I don't think the Irish want to dwell on that gene is not really an Irish gene. It is now, right? Because it's been so evenly spread throughout their genes.
1492.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, but if you again, you look at, we're picking on the Irish, but you could be talking about a Swede or someone from Norway or whatever. They're blonde hair, blue eyes, very, very white skin.
Thus the need to realize how insignificant racism is.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree. We all have the same melanocytes, just making slightly different pigment, and it all blends together in the end. Especially here in America, right? My dad was all German, my mom was Irish Dutch. I'm sure if I did my ancestry, there'd be a bigger mix that I don't even know about.
Well, I did mine, and we're Sicilian, but there's some people. The Italians, they go like, so are you Italian? I go, no, I'm a Sicilian. They go, no, so you're not Italian, are you?
Right.
I said, we're more than Italian, we're Sicilian.
Right.
But, since Sicily is right there, and they have a one town on the southeastern part of Sicily called Syracuse, which is Greek, like Syracuse, Syracuse. And my one brother is lighter than me with big blue eyes. So somehow the Nordics got down there.
Sure. And
my other brother was blonde with brown eyes and light skin,
right,
almost as light as you. And so there's North Africa, Sicily, Spain.
Sure.
Spain came across. That's how
Mediterranean, right? Yeah.
Right. That's how you get Sephardic Jews. The Sephardic Jews came from Spain.
Yes, I'm always amazed. Like my late wife was pure Italian. She's 78% Italian.
70.
Because of the other, the other incursions of various races and things like that. It was fascinating. It's fascinating, and we knew that,
Or just even go, like you're saying, Italian. If you go to northern Italy, people aren't that brown.
No,
they
all
look
light.
much more Germanic.
Because of so I mean, Italy is a good one because you go from North Africa up through Italy up to the Nordic area,
Right.
And you can go east into the Russia and Asia. You can go west out to the
Spain and the Atlantic. Yeah.
So there we go. So it's a good mixture. So the other one I was thinking about is what's skin wise and there's two things I was thinking about. There's the wine stain that people have on their skin. It's not a stain really. It's a redness that somehow it's like a birthmark.
Sure.
And the other one's an albino.
Sure.
What's that all about?
So those are two very distinct things. So there's this thing called a port wine stain. And, it was just named back in the old days. It looked like this red wine stain on someone's skin. And Gorbachev is probably the most famous person for us older people who, recognize that. But, lots of folks are born with these. And basically it's just a malformation in the skin where there's the capillaries in the skin are right on the top layer and they're dilated. That's all it is.
Do they burn differently?
No. They still have their normal color and they have these dilated collection of vessels, and they can be varying depths, and the sizes of the vessels can be different. It can be just a red color. Some can be very pebbly. Some, especially on the face, large ones on the face can be associated with some syndromes that can, be associated with central nervous system abnormalities and things like that. But that's much less common. But most people just have a little port wine stain, and it's really, other than the cosmetic piece of it, it's really inconsequential for most people.
Well, how about when you on their hands you see a big white, where let's take a African American or a black person have a big white thing on their hand.
Sure. Well, that's and then that's we're getting back into what you just mentioned a minute ago is albinism. So. Or vitiligo. So there's two things there. So albinism is a genetic thing, right? And that's, you'd have all white skin and red eyes and lots of ocular abnormalities. So that's one thing, right? That's albinism. And then vitiligo, which is and that's a genetic thing, and that's very uncommon. Edgar Winter, from old rock and roll fame a long time ago, rock and roll hoochie coo. And then there's vitiligo, which is this loss of pigment in different parts of your body, and that's an autoimmune condition. And we don't really understand why that happens. There's a lot of research being done on it, but what happens is something triggers your immune system, and your body attacks those melanocytes in that area of the skin. And it can be very focal or localized to one area, or it could be very, very widespread.
So it happens over time. It's not like at birth.
Correct. Most people, yes, most people are born with normal-looking skin when they get vitiligo. Vitiligo can occur fairly early in childhood, certainly commonly through the teen years, but it can happen anytime. And again, it's the immune system is attacking the pigment-making cells. They go on strike, stop making pigment, and you have this white spot. Now, it's more dramatic in African Americans because this skin around it is so dark, and then you have this white spot. Whereas if I have a person we call it skin type 1, right? Skin type 1 is a very, very white person. Skin type 6 is a black person. And then there's all the grades in between. But if you have a person who's skin type 1, again, Irish, Swedish, wherever, their skin is so white that they get a white patch. It's not that big a distinction, and so it's often not so bothersome to them. I have a lot of folks who are skin type 1 or 2, and their vitiligo only bugs them in the summertime when they've gotten a little tan. In the wintertime, they're so white no one can see it. But in the summertime, when they tan up a little bit, it shows up.
No, it's autoimmune. It's only autoimmune for the skin only?
Well,
all this stuff going on?
You're asking some good questions. Vitiligo is specifically autoimmune in the skin. However,
Well, first of all, why don't we mention what is autoimmune? What is
so
that?
yeah, this is another great question. So autoimmune, just as it says, auto is self-immunity. So the body, for some reason, is attacking some aspect of its own self. Yeah, and type 1 diabetes, for example, is a classic one. So that would be what people would always consider juvenile diabetes. But basically, it's an autoimmune condition where the immune system goes and attacks the beta cells of the pancreas, and they are no longer able to make insulin. And then that person is a diabetic from that day forward because those beta cells have been destroyed. There's a thing called pernicious anemia where you can attack certain cells in the gastric system, in the stomach, and then you can't absorb certain vitamins. There's autoimmune thyroid problems. There's all kinds of, and then there's all the what we think of as the classic autoimmune diseases, lupus and things like that. But one of the ones that's very common in the skin is this vitiligo, and we know that statistically, if someone has vitiligo, they are a little bit more likely to have other autoimmune conditions. So, I would often, if someone has a new onset of vitiligo, I'd say, hey, you should be following up with your primary, and they should be making sure you're not anemic and your blood sugars are normal and your thyroid is normal. I don't think they need an exhaustive workup, but you want to be paying attention to that stuff. So
some of these things are like clues of that you should be looking other places besides.
Yeah, sure, a bigger process.
So it brings me back to the physical. It's important that you have a physical.
Sure.
Everybody knows they should have a physical once a year with their physician, but if they don't see vitiligo, if the physician sees it and says, "Hey, how long you had that?" It's been a while.
There's lots of things on the skin that really point to systemic disease or abnormalities that people aren't aware of. People get this velveting thickening on the skin on the neck or armpits or in their inner thighs, when their insulin levels are very high. They may not be a type 2 diabetic yet, but they're getting there. And so those are really important things that someone who's paying attention could see that and say, hey, you ought to be talking to your primary about this. And they say, oh, my blood sugar is normal. It's like, yeah, it is for now, but it may not be down the road. So you have to.
There's a clue right here. We're looking at a clue right there.
Yeah.
And, you should be aware of that.
And that's one of the things that's great about dermatology. Everything happens right there on the surface where you can see it for the most part, which is great. You don't have to put people in a CAT scan machine or put a camera up their backside to see what's cooking. Like come in, spend 5 or 7 minutes, get undressed, get a good look over, and we can tell them a lot about their health.
Pretty interesting. And I think that this has been real educational, by the way, and we will continue on here. But, it's interesting that people take their skin for granted, if you will, right?
Yeah.
You see it every day, you look at it every day, everything looks the same, and, they don't, and they can only see what they can see.
Right.
And they can't see their butt. They can't see their backside.
I often ask people, when's the last time you looked at the bottom of your foot? And I'm guilty, if I,
I can't get to my foot. I have to pick it up and.
Right. Well, that's the thing. A lot of people, especially my older patients, couldn't get there even if they wanted to.
Right.
And they're going to a podiatrist to get their nails cut, and I'm hoping
because they can't cut their nails.
Yeah.
So you're hoping the podiatrist looks at the bottom of their foot. You're saying?
Yeah. Well, and podiatrists in general are really great about that.
Of course they are. That's their bread and butter.
Yeah.
Feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that people really don't get a good look-see, do they?
No, they really don't. I think I feel like the healthcare system is stressed, and again, like going back to the primary care docs, I feel like those men and women really are charged with doing so much. It's really difficult to expect them to do it all.
Well, the healthcare system is another story, I guess. What's going on? I mean, we're lucky to have people like you who have their own practice and aren't in a big group yet. And
I know it's the trend.
I know, and where those equity groups buy out people, and every 10 minutes you got to see a patient, or it doesn't pay. I hold Westchester at fault for this. Because I was in the hospital a while back, and it was nothing like when I was there on staff at Kingston Hospital, and I don't mind saying it, by the way.
It's hard, if you look at medicine in general, the move is to this bigger corporate model. And when I teach residents and students, I like to teach, and when I talk to residents and I ask them, so hey, what are you going to do in a year when you're out? You could go hang up a shingle somewhere, and they don't see that as a path forward to being. I don't want to use the word profitable, but everyone has to earn a living. It's just too much for the average young person to go out and hang up a shingle and suffer for a few years, and
they're not used to suffering. They're the wrong age group for suffering, financially, fiscally. When I lecture to them, I say something similar, and I say what I just said to you, but they all want a 9-to-5 job, and I tell them, I say, geez, people aren't sick 9 to 5.
Right. Yeah. Medicine's not that field. If you want that.
And then some of the other docs, like I don't want to take call. Call means you get to go to the hospital. Somebody in the hospital, you got to go see them. They go, I don't want to take call. I remember when we were on staff at 55, you were old and you didn't have to take call anymore. I'm thinking, like, who the heck ever thinks that they don't have the energy at 55 to get out the door and go to the hospital? Yeah. But they don't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, most docs don't go to the hospital anymore.
They got hospitalists
Yeah.
who don't know you.
Right.
And they got your chart. Maybe they got your chart. They don't have your chart. They don't know you. They don't have all your history. And they're nice guys. Don't get me wrong.
No, and there's some benefits to it. I having done hospital call again in my previous life as a family physician, you don't know how to navigate some of the systems in the hospital and how to make things happen, So someone who spends all their time in the hospital, they can call down the radiology and they know the number off the top of their head.
I can't believe this is the first time I'm going to disagree with you.
Yeah, that's okay. That's
because when you're in the hospital and you go and take call, and I didn't take call like you took call, but I went to the hospital and I never had a problem navigating my way around and getting what I wanted from my patients. But that's just.
Yeah,
but I hear what you're saying. That makes a good point.
Yeah.
When you don't go all the time, and these guys are always there, we'll give them a plus.
Yeah.
Hospitals.
Well, and also again, I would give a nod to the primary care docs that you have a full day of patients scheduled from 8 to 5 or whatever, and then all of a sudden, now I got to go to the hospital. Well, am I going to go at 5:30 in the morning, or am I going to go at 6:30 at night when I've finished up all my notes and done all that stuff? And it really adds to your workload, and not necessarily in an efficient way. From where I am out in Lake Katrine to get to Kingston Hospital, because we know that's not the most appropriately placed healthcare facility for our area. Just to get there is 15 minutes, especially if it's a busy traffic day or time. So it's not an efficient way for a lot of docs to do it, and I give them a
pass.
A pass on that, totally. Yeah.
Well, you're much more generous than I am. I don't give them a pass. I'm of the old school. That remember when Dr. Reppert and those guys, they show up at 11 o'clock at night.
Sure.
And they go see people. But it's a different era, a different world.
Yeah.
Everybody wants their time, and I appreciate that.
When I was a resident up at Albany Med, we did obstetrics in our family medicine residency, and we would hang out on labor and delivery, and we would help the different docs who were in the community. And we had this one old obstetrician. He was a solo practitioner, and that meant he was on call 24/7.
Right.
And he would come in. I remember sitting, this woman's trying to push out this baby, and I'm nervous. I'm this young doctor in residency, and I look over at this doctor, and he is sitting on a stool next to me, asleep. And so I gave him an elbow when the baby was coming, and he whatever,
It's going to come anyhow.
But he was that old timer. He was relaxed. It didn't, but it was just
scared.
But
and
it
if
also
he had to jump up and do something, he would do it.
Oh, and he was amazing. But it also I was like, how did he make it through life not sleeping a full night through ever? Like, how do you do that? And
sleep on the stool,
yeah,
so to speak.
Yeah, and as a dermatologist, I'm sure all the primary care docs, if anyone's listening, are thinking, who the hell is that guy talking? He doesn't take that much call.
Well, the primary guys are really special, and I think the OBGYN guys, they have to be there, but they have a group,
Yes.
and sometimes they don't make it.
Sure. No. It's a way to survive, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, we all survive somehow. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Back to dermatology in general, I guess. I'm really fixed on the physical. That people don't do that. They don't get physicals for dermatology. See, I was under the impression that you should do it at least once a year or every 18 months or something, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's some people, who, as I alluded to earlier, and I didn't really talk about it, I have some folks who come in and they've not had a lot of sun exposure. Maybe they're Italian descent. They have a little olive color in their skin. They don't have a lot of bad-looking moles. They haven't had a lot of sun. I think that person's risk is very low for developing skin cancer. Not no, certainly, as we discussed, but very low. Whereas, one of the risk factors for skin cancer is having had a skin cancer already. So that person, is at much greater risk, and that's someone I'd want to see more than once a year, so it really varies. Certainly there are guidelines, if you're diagnosed with a new melanoma, you should be seen every 3 to 4 months for 2 years, and then twice a year until you get to 5 years. So
because melanomas are so dangerous.
Yeah, if it's going to come back, you want to catch that right away.
As opposed to a basal cell.
Right.
Yeah. How often they're obviously they're at a big risk to come back. I was going to say, how often do they come back?
It really varies on the depth of the melanoma, right? So a very superficial melanoma is a low-risk lesion. A very deep melanoma is a very risky lesion. So, so if someone comes in with a deeper melanoma, that's when we're cutting out lymph nodes and getting CAT scans and PET scans and doing all kinds of unpleasant things to them. I'm usually sending them off to a cancer center for that, someone who really specializes in melanoma because...
Good point. Well... Dr. Kirscher?
I just want to say one last thing. Is because we're so, the takeaway here is we are incredibly blessed to have people that can really focus on one thing, and then to have these guys who do everything very well and can get you to the appropriate thing. I think
that's a good segue to ending our discussion. Thanks for coming, Dr. Kirscher.
It's my pleasure.
You're always great. You're always informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kirscher. That was absolutely a brilliant session. And thank you, Dr. Ed Alio, as well. You're with us here at KCR, Kingston Community Radio, AM 920 and 92.5 FM. Thank you for being with us today. And this is talk radio at its best. Inspired discussions of, by, and for the community. Again, thank you, guests, Anthony and Dr. Kirscher, and also, of course, Dr. Ed Alio for hosting today. Medical Monday, and thank you for being with us. And be with us tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. for a terrific Tuesday. And we wish you every success in growing and developing Kingston and all our neighboring communities. We now return you to Magic 92.5.